Seems to be running on time. Pretty good going. Great to be back. Slightly new experience for me in that I usually go first. The last few years of this conference, and the good thing for me is that I get to choose exactly what I talk about. I don't feel like I have to cover every base in the opening talk. You're a much better educated audience than you've been. So I'm going to talk a bit about servant leadership, but in the context of Lean-Agile transformation with Kanban as well. Can I just ask who is in the business of Lean-Agile transformation or Agile transformation, those kind of things? The vast majority of you, pretty much as I expected. And I think Tony and Chris's keynote this morning set this up fantastically. So servant leadership un-neutered. This might not be the servant leadership talk you were expecting, but we'll see. So most of you know this stuff. I won't labour the introductory slide. I will make reference to some of my work as an interim manager. I've done 2 stints as delivery manager on government digital projects. And there's something quite special happening in the government digital space. I worked on carers allowance and more recently apprenticeships. And I'll mention those at least in passing as we go. What I've been doing in the last year is this thing called agenda shift. Values-based delivery, values-based change, values-based leadership. Now, if you've read my book, the values bit won't come as any surprise to you. If you haven't, it might seem a bit of a mystery, but we'll get into that a bit later. Right, so what do we all think of when we think of servant leadership? What do you think of when you think of servant leadership? Do you see yourself as a servant leader? And what does that actually mean? A few nods, I notice. Now, I'm being a bit provocative here, but so often it seems that it is just unblock all the things and get out of the way. I read a lot of very shallow teaching on servant leadership, and it's about just getting stuff done for the team and then getting out of the way so they can go on and do the stuff that they're best at. That's not terrible advice. In fact, it's not a bad place to start at all, but it does have some dangers. If we see our job primarily as serving the team, and that's what a lot of servant leadership teaching seems to be saying, there's a danger, and the danger is that it becomes serving the process. Serving the process is a very easy trap to fall into. It's one that I probably have fallen into in previous parts of my career. Perhaps some of you recognise it as a pitfall. But it's not really what servant leadership is all about. I think actually it's better to think not about regressing into serving the process, but think about progressing towards something actually more profound. So moving from serving the team to serving the purpose, and then from serving the purpose to pursuing purpose. Actually helping us, helping our teams, even the wider organisation, actually understand what its purpose is and whether we're set up in such a way to best deliver against that purpose and so on. And I believe that is actually very true to some of the original foundational work on servant leadership, work by people like Greenleaf and co. So, servant leadership, the book. Who's read Greenleaf's book? Not a single one of you. Now that is actually quite staggering. I thought I'd see at least a few hands up. Greenleaf is the guy that a lot of the Agile reference material points to as the original source for this stuff. He started with 3 essays that he wrote in the 70s, and those essays then later became his book. You can now see there's a 25th anniversary edition of its book. I mean, it's been an important book. It's been republished and so on. People write commentaries about it. There are people that have their own models based on his model and so on. If you go and look up servant leadership, this is one of the original references. And let's look at those essays. The servant as leader. That seems fairly straightforward. The institution as servants. Now this is getting bigger already. And actually what he was talking about was the way that institutions serve society. Writing back in the 70s, he could see how corporations were becoming increasingly powerful in their ability to shape society. We've seen that so much in the last few years. The degree to which, the likes of Google and Apple and Microsoft influence the way that everyday work gets done. Not just everyday work, everyday social life gets done. Facebook, so on. So the institution as servant. How do our institutions serve society? Actually a pretty crucial question. And then there's the last one, trustees as servants. So this is perhaps back to the leadership question. How do we, in our positions of responsibility, whatever they are, make sure that the people we're responsible for, the processes we're responsible for, the teams we're responsible for, are working in a way that is true to the purpose and values of the organisations that we serve? Really big stuff. It's not just about unblocking all the things getting out of the way. It's about something very much bigger. So his key thought, and this is the bit that people do remember, or at least they remember the first two words, servant first, then leader. And the idea is that we can learn how to serve, we kind of earn the right, or we get given the trust by our teams that enables us to be better leaders. I think there's some really amazing systems thinking going on here, and systems thinking at the level of the Toyotas of this world. The servant leadership that we understand, the helping other people to be successful, removing impediments, and so on, helping people to grow, helping with their skills, helping them with their relationships, and so on, so that people and teams become more effective together. Helping people find autonomy and meaning in their work. To get meaning in your work isn't just about being better at your work, it's about connecting with what you're doing, connecting to the purpose of what you're doing. And it's a key part of leadership is to help people feel connected to the purpose of the work that they're doing. And to make that a process of discovery. Help others find autonomy and meaning in the development and pursuit of the organisation's values, mission, and purpose in society. That's quite big stuff. But looking back at my own work, I'm not a CEO of a big company. I've had lower and middle roles in the organisations that I've worked in and worked with. But I did feel that I understood and cared about the work that I was doing and what effect it had on its customers and the position of the company in society and so on. And I think that's actually something that we can all take an interest in and help other people to take an interest in. And the last bit, help develop servant leadership in others. So we got these reinforcing cycles going on. We're not just training people to be clones of ourselves, us as servant leaders, bringing on the next generation of servant leaders. We're helping create an organisation that's going to grow to become the organisation it needs to be to deliver on its purpose, filled with people that care about that and that will make it continue on into the future. So I think he's identified some of the things that make for lasting organisations and the kind of organisations that we would like to work in. So that's Greenleaf. So why is it that we remember only the serve first bit and not the leading part? We're quite comfortable with words like servant, trust, listening, understanding, and so on. But we find some of these things a bit harder. Not all of us feel that we're inspirational. Not all of us feel that it's our responsibility to give direction, to set direction. Where do purpose and goal and things like that fit into what we're doing? Foresight. How many of us feel that we're only ever reacting to things, or that our organisation is only reacting, or our management is only reacting? Greenleaf said that foresight was he literally described it as a moral imperative, was for leaders to have foresight. Organisations led by people that don't have foresight are very, very vulnerable. I think that's the reason for that. Influence. Community we've talked about the organisation's place in society. So community isn't just about the community of people working in the organisation, it's also about the community that is around the organisation, the people that it serves, and so on. And the last one is being a steward, or the concept of stewardship, and we'll come to that later in the talk. So why is it we find those first things, that's the stuff that gets taught? A lot of this other stuff is kind of neglected. Why is that? I think there are two reasons. One is an easy and obvious one. One's a bit more subtle. The easy and obvious one is that second list is just harder. And it's easy to write about the things that we find easy, and we can encourage other people to do those easy things. I think there's another reason. It's partly about where we are in 21st century society. It's also partly about a message of Agile as well. And it's one that I understand, I will say before I dive into this. But we find notions of power and authority discomforting. You know, we don't like to be told what to do. We don't want to feel subject to authority. We may even feel uncomfortable being given power over other people and so on. And as a result, it's made us a bit ambivalent about the subject of leadership. We're not sure that we want to be led. Going back to Greenleaf, not being sure that we want to be led is actually a reason for servant leadership. You know, if we can serve first, then we earn the trust of the people that actually might need leadership. And it's not that we don't have power or authority. If you, for example, are given the role of Scrum Master in your organisation, that has given you some authority, just that role. But there's also the authority that's given to you by the team, you know, as a result, first of all, of your role, but also of your experience, of the decisions that you make, of your character, how you deal with people in the team, and so on. So authority is actually something very much like trust and respect. It's something that you build, something that you earn. And leadership is something that's needed, as Tony and Chris said, you know, taking out the middle management level of a company, something that's been tried before, typically doesn't end well. So what I'm going to do, what I've done in the past, I've explained opportunities for leadership in the context of the 9 Kanban values, and it's been about opportunities for leadership that anybody could find. Anyone could take the opportunity to grow into leadership. I'm setting the bar a little higher this time, and following on from Tony and Chris, really, talking about Lean-Agile transformation and the role of leadership in actually making that happen in strategies for Lean-Agile transformation, and thinking about both where people need to demonstrate leadership for it to happen, and how it creates opportunities for other people to demonstrate servant leadership or to grow into the role of servant leaders. And along the way, we'll talk about some pitfalls as well. Now, those of you that are in the business of Lean-Agile transformation will know it's not an easy road. You will know that very often transformations get so far and then they plateau or they regress. And then you've got to decide what it is that we're doing wrong. What's the barrier that we're facing that's stopping us from progressing? And perhaps by thinking of it in terms of different strategies and the pitfalls associated with those strategies, you'll think of ways to help unblock the transformation that you're in at the moment. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to fill out this matrix in 6 steps. And each of those steps is a particular strategy that we might apply. So we start with a very simple strategy, a skills-first strategy. You've probably seen this before. Who's heard the term sheep dip training? A few of you. So this is the idea that you send everybody on the same training course. And it's fantastic. We're all on the same page now. And we'll all from day 2, we'll have the course on Monday. From Tuesday, we'll all be agile, and it'll be fantastic. Now, I have this disclaimer here. I am a trainer. I have done and do, and actually I'm quite happy to do, sheep dip training, getting everybody onto some basic same page. And I do a 1-day class that talks about service, how to improve it using Kanban, We use hypothesis stuff, how to frame hypotheses, how to explore them. I'm also interested in servant leadership on the right. I won't talk about that now because we'll come to that later. But there are some teachable skills in all these areas. But there's a big pitfall. There's a big blank area of screen in this picture here. You're asking an awful lot of your organisation if you think that you can train everybody, then everybody will suddenly work out how they're now supposed to work. Working with new processes, working with new relationships in the organisation, work with completely different rules of the game, working to different goals, and so on. You know, the idea that people can work it out for themselves, it's actually pretty laughable when we think about it. Sometimes we think we can do this not with training, but with coaching. The trouble then is that the vision for it all is in the mind of the coach, or maybe it's the manager, but still other people don't see where it's going, and they feel perhaps a bit lost even. So we need some better strategies than the skills-first strategy, although it has its place. The second strategy is a very interesting one. I call it the needs-first strategy. So make the discovery of needs a first-class activity and an ongoing activity, not just gathering requirements at the beginning of a project and then delivering requirements, but actually realising that engaging with our customers, engaging with our users, discovering what their needs are, understanding how well we're responding to them, and that being the driver, not just of better products, but also a driver of organisational change. So that's a strategy employed by government digital services. Start with needs. User needs, not government needs, was the mantra. And this is a mantra, mixed metaphors here, but this is a mantra with teeth. Who has worked in government digital services, government digital projects here? A couple of hands. I thought it might be a few more. They seem to suck up all the agile coaches in the country for a couple of years. Government digital services is part of the Cabinet Office. You know, it does matter. It does have clout. There is a life cycle that government digital services go through. You start off with discovery, then you go into an alpha phase where you test it internally or test with a few key users. You go into a beta phase where your new service is running in parallel with the old one, and then you go live. At every stage in that progression, you go through an assessment. And if in your assessment you can't demonstrate a commitment to user needs and the priority you give to user needs, if you can't demonstrate that not only are you currently engaging with users to do user research, user experience, those kind of things, but if you can't demonstrate that you're committed to continuing those things into the future, committed to making sure that your service will continue to evolve and grow, you will fail your assessment. And if you fail your assessment, you won't progress to the next stage. You won't go into beta. You won't go into production. You won't go into live. So this has teeth. This is a really strategic move by government digital services, and I think it's fantastic. I want to stress that needs aren't the same thing as requirements. I mean, project after project after project proves that you can deliver requirement after requirement after requirement, never actually meet a need. I'm not going to talk about the techniques of needs and stuff here, but they're well understood, well rehearsed. You can look at what look at Lean UX, for example, and that'll give you a very good flavour of what this stuff is about. But there's a pitfall. What's the pitfall here? Can anyone guess? It's a very real pitfall. I've not seen it in government because very often there are people already in place to make this happen. But a very real pitfall I've seen in the private sector. Okay, we'll start with needs. We'll get the customer experience consultants in. And then disillusion sets in when the organisation finds it unable to deliver the IT changes, the process changes, the organisation changes, all the other changes necessary to deliver on the vision delivered by the customer experience folks. Do you mean ownership is missing? I mean that they don't have the delivery capability. You start to get people inside your organisation and even customers of the organisation excited about how things are going to be. And then months later, there's nothing to show for it. That generates disillusion and cynicism and all the rest of it. It really does happen. So let's work from the other way. Let's work from the area of service delivery. And what I'm describing these words at the bottom, scale out team by team and service by service, shorten customer feedback loops, control work in progress across the organisation. That is the Kanban scaling story. You could use another scaling story, a Scrum scaling story in its place if you wish. What we're trying to do is both improve the capability of teams and then from there understand, are we actually improving capability from the customer's perspective? Are we able to deliver faster to customers? Are we able to make customers more satisfied, for example? Now, the way we introduce this with Kanban is with a process called STATIK. Again, a quick show of hands, who's seen STATIK before? About half of you. STATIK stands for the Systems Thinking Approach to Implementing Kanban. Desperately needed the acronym STATIK. Did that a couple of years ago, and it was actually wonderful to hear it being picked up right away. The process was well understood. We've been doing this for years, but people found it very hard to refer to. Giving it a catchy acronym made that very much easier. You can see I put some of these in bold, and the ones I put in bold are the ones that are primarily or significantly about the customer. Understands what makes the service fit for purpose for the customer. Step 1. Identify sources of dissatisfaction with the current system. And in doing this, we try to look at it from two perspectives, the dissatisfactions of the customer and the frustrations of those people working inside the system, the people working in the teams. Very often there are some common root causes between those two sets of dissatisfactions, the dissatisfactions versus the frustrations. But we really are encouraging people to look at the problem from the outside and not just from the inside. Analysing demand, where does it come from? Customers by and large. Introduce classes of service. What are the different kinds of capability or levels of capability that we need for our customers? Socialise the design and negotiate implementation. David Anderson says that one of the tests of whether you're doing Kanban is whether you expect it or it is already happening, that it's changing the customer interface. This is something that I teach. I say to people, never have a prioritization discussion with a customer where you haven't first discussed what you've just delivered, what you're currently delivering on, and how they can help you get the stuff from that second category into the first one. What can they do to help you get the stuff over the line? If you're prioritizing work on its own merits, you're not prioritizing at all. You need to prioritize it relative to the things that you're already doing and might have to drop. And you have to make choices between your different alternatives. So when you're doing Kanban well, when you're doing service delivery well, it should change the customer interface. So plenty of opportunity for servant leadership here. We're putting ourselves in the shoes of the people that we serve, trying to understand what it is they need. Even though we're talking from the delivery space now rather than the need space, we're starting to look outwards, not just turning inwards, not avoiding that risk of just serving the process. So the pitfalls of the team-first approach. Very common. Teams define success in their own terms. They notice that they start to deliver faster. This is actually great. But they look at how fast work gets through their system. They fail to understand what impact that's having on the customer. They fail to check that the work that they're delivering is actually of value to the customer, is working for the customer, is beginning to meet customer needs, and so on. So this on its own, as an initial strategy, delivers some early benefits, but often, I would say mostly even, doesn't take you the whole way. These two in combination, actually, quite effective. In one of my current engagements, this is exactly what we're doing. Those customer experience consultants are working in the top left-hand corner. Us accelerated delivery people are working in the bottom left-hand corner. And very explicitly, we are talking to each other and to the client about it meeting the middle. How do we get our new vision for the customer experience and our delivery efforts underneath to meet in the middle so that we can start to evolve the customer experience at a rate that is appropriate for the organisation and gives the customers what they need when they need it. So first three strategies there, skills first, needs first, team first, and definitely some opportunities for servant leadership there. And we are, in the first one, looking about developing, growing people, but also leaving them to work out a lot of things for themselves. That's the pitfall. Needs first, we are getting straight to what are we trying to do for our customers? What is our purpose is one way you could describe that. And then team first. Again, helping develop the capability of the system, but probably doing it in a way that is likely to plateau quite quickly. We'll see some improvements in performance very quickly. We often see that when we introduce Kanban, but without some extra direction or without some external goals, that tends to be or can be where it stops. Also, having just fixed some gaps, there's no guarantee that it's going to carry on and get a momentum of its own. It's going to be sustained into the future. So the next three strategies, the last three strategies, are all about different ways of sustaining transformation. And we'll look again at how servant leadership can inform those and how they can develop servant leadership in the organisation. So this next one is improvement driven, and this is kind of where I was perhaps a year ago with Agenda Shift. The story here is that when my book Kanban from the Inside came out a couple of years ago, at the back of the book, or in the last chapter, there was a set of bullet points. It was just a checklist of things to look out for, things, next steps for you as the reader to try. Quite a common thing for a book. What I then did was turn that into a spreadsheet that I published. And Matt Phillip, who's one of the speakers here, came to Lean Kanban UK and also the France conference a year and a half ago or so to explain his experiences of using that spreadsheet with a number of his teams in his organisation and repeatedly doing assessment with them, getting them to self-assess where they thought they were in these 40 plus areas and driving an improvement process using that assessment. I went on to productise this. I was actually a bit embarrassed that I was encouraging coaches to email spreadsheets around. I really hate it when I receive a spreadsheet to fill out. As the person doing the survey, it's pretty unpleasant work to receive 20 emails back with attachments on them that you then have to consolidate into results and so on. So I put it on the web, and my MVP was a global survey, the 2015 Depth of Kanban Land survey, I called it. And here are the results. And the results are quite interesting. I've sorted the different categories, and you may recognise those as Kanban values, strongest to weakest. Transparency first. Basically, everyone's doing stand-up meetings or something that serves the role of the stand-up meeting. Very good on transparency, very good on things like visualisation as well. Down at the bottom end, appalling on balance, so particularly balance between demand and capability, or demand and capacity. Lots of teams self-reporting that they are overburdened, self-reporting that they start work with no reference to the work that they're already doing. So already not doing that prioritisation thing I just talked about. But the very, very worst one, and this actually came as a surprise to me, was customer focus. Looking at the scale, barely started early gains are 1 and 2. Getting there, nailing it consistently are 3 and 4. The vast majority are 1 and 2, not 3 or 4 in that category. So that was just a survey. That was interesting. These are some of the prompts. Dragan here has helped me reword some of these prompts to make them a little bit friendlier than they were a year and a half ago. So, for example, number 2, we involve customers to validate work items as they are being built. If you've heard me do previous talks, you've heard me talk about the actually quite humbling effect of introducing validation into our process. Having a check at the end of the process that the work is already delivering value to our customer had a transformative effect on our work as a whole. I could talk for several minutes on that. I'll put that to one side. The last one, we manage potential work as options for selection rather than orders for fulfillment. I would admit that this is the one that scored the weakest of all the prompts in the whole survey. Now, I will acknowledge that possibly the reason it scores weakly is that people actually found it hard to understand what this actually means. The idea of the work arriving at our system being options that we can choose from rather than things that we must do is actually a really key part of being successful with Kanban, being successful with Agile, being successful at all in getting our work and our capability into some kind of balance. Particularly if you work in IT, the list of things that we could do vastly, vastly, vastly outweighs the list of things that we actually have the time and the ability to do right now. So we have to be making choices. And I found with teams that treat every piece of work that comes in as an order that must be fulfilled, the quality of their processes, the quality of the systems that they build really badly suffers as a result. The teams themselves feel they no longer have ownership of their own process. They feel that they no longer have ownership of the systems that they're building. They can't do work if it's not prioritised by a customer. So this is where the concept of stewardship comes in. You need people on the delivery side taking ownership for what they deliver and actually making sure that they are prioritising themselves the improvements to process, to systems, to platforms, to everything else. That means they can deliver a good result that's sustainable over time. So, for example, what we do with these surveys, we get people to prioritise which ones do you think is most important. So if you thought that last one was most important, we'd then think about how do we make it actionable. So make that last one actionable and turn it into a hypothesis, just as we might do now in feature development. We believe that having the ability to prioritise some work for ourselves will result in a better quality product, better quality platform, and we'll be able to measure that in terms of system availability, the number of bugs that escape into production, over the long term, the satisfaction of our customer and the satisfaction of our teams, and so on. So we start with these prompts, we get the teams to generate actions, and we reframe those as hypotheses. And we can expand those, dig into those with A3s. So here's an A3. We look at the assumptions and dependencies behind the action that we're proposing to take, the risks, both upside and downside, from making this change. Pilot experiments. What's the cheapest way that we could test whether this idea is likely to work or not? Again, this is a great idea that works whether in the feature space or the organisational change space. What people are we going to need to talk to make this happen? How are we going to negotiate the details of the change that we're trying to make? And finally, at the end of the process, what are the insights that we gather from trying to make this change? The best way to understand how your organisation works is to try to change it. And whether you're successful or fail in that change, you will definitely learn something, and we try and encourage people to capture those insights. And again, just with feature development, just as feature development can be hypothesis-driven, our organisational change can be hypothesis-driven, we can visualise the progress of those changes across a Kanban board. And this is a Kanban board like the hypothesis-driven change that's very influenced by Lean Startup. This is work that I would credit Jeff Anderson with starting. He wrote a book a few years ago now, The Lean Change Method, Managing Agile Organisational Transformation Using Kanban, Kotter and Lean Startup Thinking. I've slightly adapted his original board design, but it's very closely based on his. His, in turn, you will see in Lean Startup books. So if you read, for example, Running Lean, you will see a board very similar to that. And I just remembered I got running lean at home and I meant to bring it back to Dragon. So I came back to London today. Never mind. Hypotheses all the way along here as well. Is it important? Do we believe it's important? Can we negotiate the details of our change? Can we make it work? And if it does work, does it deliver the benefits we said at the beginning we were going to look for? And based on whether we see it or not, are we going to adopt the change for good? Are we going to revert it saying, okay, it was an interesting idea, but it didn't work, we're going to revert back to where we were before? Are we going to reject our ideas at the very beginning? This change is never going to be important enough for us to waste our time on. Or do we get part way through, negotiating the details of the change, trying it out, and abandon it as unworkable? So organising experiments for implementation. I think it takes a special kind of humility, but I think it's a really important and powerful thing to treat organisational change as a hypothesis. I think what we're so used to is managers telling us, we're going to make this change to our organisation. I'm not going to explain it, well, I might explain the rationale, but not in such a way that we can test anybody's thinking, not in such a way that we can test afterwards whether the change delivered the benefit that was hoped for or not. So there's a distinct lack of accountability there as well. It takes a certain amount of humility to reframe it in that way. Was that a question?
No, I was just going to say, I think the thing about that I've experienced is it actually forces you down that road to form alliances with people and have them understand.
Absolutely.
You're helping them to do this, to see what the possibilities are.
Absolutely. So those who didn't hear you, hear you. Framing it in that way helps you form alliances to work with the people to do the change effectively. That's exactly the purpose of the A3 here. It encourages us to break it down, it encourages to sit with a mentor who will challenge our thinking, and it encourages us to think about who all the people are going to be involved in making that change happen. And we make it visible. Until all those people are lined up, until we've got people behind our change, the people designing the change and the people impacted by the change, all agreeing that this is the right thing to do, that change sits there. But yes, even just visualising it actually helps with that as well. Certainly if the people involved are the same people doing the work and being impacted by it, which is the case for change within teams. Had at some point to talk about values, and we've seen 6 of them in the survey. But it's very much a values-based strategy. We're getting teams to assess themselves against prompts that are already well aligned to values, so well aligned to transparency, balance, collaboration, and so on. So when they're generating actions that should take them into better alignment with those values. And that process, we hope, will help them better discover what they're about, what their purpose is, what their organisational values actually are, whether there is a clash between the values that we're talking about in the bottom left-hand corner and the values claimed by the organisation. And as we heard again with Tony and Chris's talk, there's a real problem when the organisation claims one set of values, but the way the organisation works actually seems to work in complete opposition to those. So very much a values-based strategy. There are pitfalls here. And really, these are the pitfalls of any improvement-based strategy. Improvement-based strategies on their own tend to run out of steam. Quick show of hands, who's seen that before? Who's seen your agile retrospectives run out of steam, for example? Yeah, more hands go up. Most hands go up. It's hard. Well, it seems easy to start with because we're fixing stuff that we're in control of. The more we fix stuff within our control, the more our actual constraints move to outside our team. It takes longer, it's harder to get these things done. You have to work with other people to get them done, and so on. That's one pitfall. What organisations typically lack are mechanisms to keep those going. So mechanisms that actually require these processes still to be happening. They also lack sometimes some external vision as well. Teams left to their own devices, can too easily identify the things that would make their lives more comfortable, help them be more effective in their day-to-day work. But there's no guarantee that the changes they come up with will necessarily align to any longer-term strategy, to an external vision, to the purpose of the organisation, and so on. So we can address those two in turn with the last two strategies. The first one I call alignment-driven. But I could move straight on to the next slide. Using David Anderson's picture about feedback loops. This is one of my favourite pictures of his. I use this as a checklist for all the different kind of feedback loops your organisation can have. And by feedback loop, I mean bringing together people and information in a forum where the people are able to make decisions, to take action based on what they're seeing. This is what feedback loops are. They help out bringing control, helping get things back on track when they're off track, and so on. And the sad thing is, and my survey revealed this, my client work definitely reveals this, and I'm sure you'll relate to this as well. We're quite good at doing the things along the bottom row, and we're pretty rubbish about the rest. So everyone's doing stand-up meetings. Everybody has some way of getting work into the system, the replenishment, the commitment meeting. We all have some way of getting work out of the system, the delivery planning meeting. But we're doing very little, for example, with the one in the middle, the service delivery review, to bring together customer views, customer satisfaction, for example, operational views, the capacity of our systems and how well they perform, as well as our own delivery capability. How quickly are we able to deliver on stuff? How quickly are we delivering features? How quickly are we validating that the things that we've delivered are meeting needs? I've now instituted those on these government digital projects, particularly on the apprenticeships one. And it's a very interesting meeting. Now, it didn't go amazingly well, because we only allowed half an hour for these meetings, and to bring a customer view, a delivery view, and an operational view together in one meeting in half an hour is a very big ask. So the meeting itself was a struggle, but the process of getting that information together was extremely valuable. So our product owner, for example, would talk to the help desk. Our user researcher would gather customer satisfaction data. We started with that. If our customer satisfaction wasn't moving in the right direction, if our help desk calls were going up rather than down, we're doing something wrong. And we should challenge everything else that we're doing in that context. So even though the meeting itself was a struggle, it still helped to catalyse some useful changes. Bigger meetings, operations review. Are we actually doing the right things? Do we have the right teams delivering the right services to the right customers? And that obviously is driven by strategy on the left. And are we taking carrying the right amount of risk? Are we deliberately taking on the risks where we should? Are we managing the risks that we don't want to own, and so on? So the bottom row, pretty well represented in most agile teams. Despite us talking about this one for, ever since David's book came out, so since 2010 or so, for the last 6 years, talking about the importance of service delivery reviews, only really a minority of teams or services are actually holding them.
How often should you be doing the top 4?
In my experience, it depends. You may not be operating at that level. You may have very little influence on how strategy review is done. Service delivery review, roughly monthly, seems to work pretty well. When I was at UBS, we used to have quite regular meetings with representatives of the business, where I, as a development manager, our service delivery manager, and a representative of the business would get together and talk generally about how things were. It would be very much against data, what we're delivering, what our plans were, how production was performing, what issues we had, what capacity constraints we had, and so on. So we had it frequently enough to make sure that we were on, we on the delivery side and the business were, roughly on the same page. Operations review, quarterly would be plenty for that probably. Risk review actually did this on that apprenticeships project. We had quite a traditionally trained project manager on the project. Between myself and her, we actually did maintain a traditional risk register, and I found it actually beneficial to review it quite frequently, weekly or fortnightly. Yeah. So alignment driven, pitfall there. Are we actually aligned to the right things? Put it simply. Leads us to the last one, the purpose-driven strategy. Start with purpose and values. What are we about? And use that to help us drive what we're measuring in terms of fitness for purpose. Use that to at least inform, if not drive, our agenda for change, to help us determine what capabilities we need and what level of capability we need, and for that to drive all the things on the left. What we really need is for that stuff on the top right, if I'm looking that way, the stuff on the bottom left to meet in the middle. You know, if we've got the teams making changes that is aligned to what we're trying to achieve as an organisation, we stand a much greater chance of success. And if we go back a few slides, also we're regularly checking that it's actually happening. We won't run out of steam. I've worked with too many organisations where there's a lack of follow-through, where people can say, yes, this is wrong in the organisation. We've got some great ideas for changing it. Somebody may even be responsible for changing it, but somehow these things never actually happen because there's never the opportunity to see what are we actually doing, is it taking us in the right direction, are we doing the right things? There is no feedback loop. So a quick reflection as I wrap up. Where I'd like to aim for is where everybody can with confidence respond to this reflection. Know what you're delivering, to whom, and why it matters. I've been putting this up in training classes for a number of years. Once, 4 years ago or so, a guy came to me on day 2 in the coffee break and said, I've been lying awake all night thinking about this one. It was quite a shock to me. He'd just been given a piece of work and he did it. Given a piece of work and he did it. Given a piece of work and he did it. And suddenly he it's like his eyes were open. He suddenly thought, I don't know why I do half the work I do. And that started to bother him. I think it's good that it started to bother him. And if those kind of questions bother more people, I think our organisations would be in better shape than they are. And understanding how you do it, how well you do it, and how to sustain it. I'll give you just a moment to look and think about that. So that, I think, is what servant leadership, the fuller version of it, is actually all about. It's not just about how we do things and how well we think we do things, removing impediments, developing people. It's also about making sure that people know why we're doing what we're doing. And if that's not clear enough, then doing the discovery work to make sure that people are, that together we start to discover what we're about, what our purpose actually is. I think that's a model of servant leadership that is truer to the Greenleaf model than the unblock all the things and get out of the way model that seems to get taught nowadays. The pitfall, it just always happens too late. No one ever starts here. People get to here when they realise that the staff, the middle management and the senior management aren't talking the same language. I'm running out of time, so I'll just leave that one out there. I think actually Tony and Chris, were getting to those same issues in their keynote this morning. So those are the 6 strategies. Maybe one of those you provoked something in you. Maybe you thought, perhaps we're missing that in our current transformation. If that's true, love to have you come and talk to me afterwards. Serve the team by all means. Don't let that fall into just serving the purpose. Start to serve the purpose of your team, the purpose of your wider organisation. Pursue purpose, help connect people to purpose. I think that's the true message of servant leadership. Now it's over to you. I do encourage you to read Greenleaf. There's the book there, Servant Leadership. The Servant as Leader is available as a PDF to read. It's a very personal thing. It's not as well written as the book, but worth reading if you want to read something quick. It's about 28 pages, I think. That assessment, there's now a 2016 survey. You can have a play with a mini version of the assessment, 18 prompts. If you go to agendashift.com/2016, you can try that and do stay in touch. I don't know how much time do we have for questions.
5 minutes. You've got 5 minutes on it.
We do have 5 minutes for questions, that's great. So I actually finished on time. Thank you. We actually do have a bit of time, so I'm going to actually throw it over to you. How many of you are in now or recently been in a stuck transformation, and do you think that one of those strategies might have been helpful? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a stuck transformation at the moment.
Yeah.
For the benefit of everyone, I'm more from a service management
Yes.
perspective, so coming from an IT driven one.
Yes.
So this is my first Kanban type conference, so it's really good to see some of this regular.
Yeah, great. So for the benefit of the camera and those of you that can't hear, so he's been working in an ITIL, service delivery, ITIL type world, and he's read my book, so that's great. And what do you think has got you stuck, and which of those strategies, if I move back to that, might be appropriate to you now?
So mine is a particularly, well, everyone could say it's kind of sticky, messy transformation.
Yes.
And all of those things will play well in there.
That's interesting.
Too much has happened too quickly, the capability doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The wrong people's needs are being addressed, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not.
Good.
Selling customers.
Good.
And teams are crying out for leadership and are wondering what they should be doing. Like you said earlier, they just want to do, they just want to do good stuff.
Yes.
And sometimes they just want stuff put in front of them, giving them more of a purpose, knowing how they can self-serve that sort of stuff.
Good.
And look out for them.
Right, just summarise that, make sure we're addressing the right people's needs and move from there. We are apparently out of time, so thank you very much. Thank you.